Hey everybody, Miss Buchelt and Mr. Anderson back again, teaming up to bring you another awesome art and technology combined lesson that will span 2 different days this last week of school. Miss Buchelt and I had a lot of fun thinking about this and putting this together, and I think there's a lot of things that you'll learn out of it too. So Miss Buchelt's going to explain what the lesson's all about.
All right guys, so as you can see on the board, we are going to be learning about how to take photos, right? And how to make a photograph artistic. All right, now there are lots of different ways that you can be taking pictures. A lot of us take pictures using our iPads or using our cell phones or a parent's cell phone, but there's also some really cool digital cameras, and maybe you have a digital camera and you want to do this project using that. That's just fine. But we're gonna first have step 1, and that is going to teach you how to take a photograph so that it looks the best that it can. All right, now Mr. Anderson and I went out and we filmed and took some really great pictures, and we're showing you some good examples and some bad examples. And then you can take what you've learned from that video and you need to go and take your own photograph. And after you take that photograph, we're going to be getting step 2. That's going to be coming to you on Thursday. Okay, now step 2 is where you're going to take your final photograph and we are going to transform it. Now, transform means to change, to make it look different. And we're going to show you that demonstration on Thursday, and that's going to be using a special website that some of you have used before. But this first step is just learning how to take a really great photograph. So we hope you guys have fun getting to see this first step, and good luck taking your photos.
Hi you guys. So we came outside next to the pond and we were gonna show you sort of our mindset for how to pick a good spot for a photo. And there's a lot of options out here by the pond. All right, you guys have been here before. What a beautiful day. So a lot of things I'm thinking about when I get out to a location like this that has lots of photo opportunities. The pond sparked our interest. The clouds are pretty dramatic today. Just gonna show you what I see here. What would you take a picture of? How would you frame it up? One thing Miss Buchelt and I noticed right away was this really bright tree right here that's blooming. And personally, I also like that there's not a lot of vehicles and other buildings in the background. So compared to some of these other spots, even though the pond is reflective and interesting, there's a lot of other buildings and cars in the way. I think we're gonna go over there and explore framing up something by that tree. Let's do it.
Okay, so first thing that you can do is help yourself out a little bit, and helping yourself out by drawing your idea first. Now this doesn't have to be like a finished drawing. It can just be a quick sketch or a quick plan. Use simple lines, simple shapes, so that when you go to take your picture, you know what you're going to be wanting to look for. Now, when you are trying to decide how you want to take a picture, you want to keep in mind a big word, and this big word is called composition. Okay, composition means the way that you arrange something on your paper, or in our case, in the camera, right? So as I'm looking at my paper, I'm going to hold it this way. It's called horizontal or landscape direction. And I think that's the way that I want my portrait to be, but maybe we can do 2 options. So how about this? I am going to draw a rectangle here going landscape, and then a rectangle going, this is called the portrait, okay, or vertical and horizontal, so that I have 2 different options and I can decide which option I like better. So when you are arranging your composition, putting your objects into your paper, you're going to need to keep in mind a lot of points. Okay, now these are things that artists think about naturally and we think about them fast. Okay, but you are still a learner and you're still learning what these things mean. So if you don't get them all fast, that's all right. Just start with a couple of them. But some of the things that we think about, we want to think about the foreground, middle ground, and the background. Foreground is what's closest to me. For example, the grass. The middle ground is going to be, actually the foreground would even be this big tree. The middle ground would be the little garden that's right behind the tree. And then the background is that far back patch of green grass with the trees, like the evergreen trees, the pine trees, and the other types of trees that are growing in the background there. So when you're drawing those things, you want to draw them the way that they are. Are they in the foreground, middle ground, or background? So I'm looking at my foreground here. It has this beautiful tree. So if I want to show that tree in the foreground, I'm going to do just simple lines to show all of these branches coming out of my tree. And then just some squiggly, swirly lines to show where the blossoms are of my tree. Okay, see how simple this drawing is? I am not trying to think about making it perfect. Okay, and let's see, down here, there's like a rock bed, and then there's bushes all around here. I'm drawing really fast. Okay, and that's one thing that will also save you time when you're deciding how you want it to look. All right, so I have my tree, and I put that over towards the right side of my paper. Now, that is a special word that artists call the rule of thirds. If I were to draw an imaginary line here, here, see how it breaks into 3 sections? 1, 2, 3. And then we go the other way with it. Okay, and it makes a grid. 1, 2, 3. This is called the rule of thirds, okay, because there's 3 sections going each way. And when you arrange objects or trees in the landscape or a person who's in your photograph, you want to keep in mind this grid. Do you see that grid? Can you imagine it there? Where would it be? So I have my foreground tree in my rule of thirds. Now let's look at our middle ground. Our middle ground has the bushes right there. So I'm going to draw a line that shows kind of where that patch of bushes is going to be, and maybe just draw a couple of bushes, knowing that there's going to be a lot more in there when I take the picture. And finally, the background that starts kind of at this curb here, and it goes up onto a hill with some more trees in the background. Now I'm being careful not to show too many things here around my tree, just because I know there's gonna be a lot of blossoms and leaves in my foreground tree here. And so there would be my plan. Now you have to think about also, do you want to have a person? Do you want a model? So if I was going to have a person, where would I put them in here? Maybe I want them sitting down on the ground with their legs up, kind of just like looking at nature. Maybe they're reading a book, sitting underneath the tree. Maybe I want them standing up tall, kind of in front of a tree right here, like there's their head. Okay, you can decide how you want the person to be posing, and that's important for you to help decide what you want your person to be doing. All right, so in this case, Mr. Anderson is going to be taking the picture, and he's going to be deciding the composition, but Miss B is going to be the model. So Mr. Anderson is going to have to direct me about how to stand, where to stand, so that his photograph comes out the way that he can imagine it to be. So I did my landscape sketch. Now I would go on to doing my portrait sketch, and it's going to be the same thing, same ideas that we talked about here. All right, so let's zoom through that as you see me draw my landscape composition.
you guys, back in the studio here after our photo shoot. That was a good time together with Miss Buchelt. I think things turned out pretty nice. In fact, right after we took those last images, the sun came back out, and I took a couple more pictures, and I want to show you my results. One of the great things after taking photos is coming back into the house or back into the studio, taking your photos off your phone or your camera and putting them onto your computer. Then you have a digital file that you can start to look at and pick which ones look great, which ones you want to delete. And I thought I would share the photos I took with you right now. So let's take a look at the photos I took of Miss Buchelt. All right, you guys, here we are taking a look at the photos. And I wanted to show you the good and the bad photos and talk a little bit about my decisions as a photographer, why I chose the good pictures and why some are not working out too good. This is my first picture where Miss Buchelt was seated with her sketch pad. And I'm going to go ahead and say this one is not a good picture. Do you have any ideas why? One of the things Miss Buchelt talked about was composition. In this case, it's hard to understand what is most important in this photo. Is Miss Buchelt important? Doesn't seem like it. She seems like she's kind of stuck over here off to the side. So maybe this picture isn't really about her too much. Is perhaps the tree important? I don't know. It's kind of up at the top. So I don't know if that's what's most important here. It almost looks like I wanted to take a picture of this middle ground island, which is kind of a goofy subject matter. So this is a confusing picture for your audience or your viewer because they don't really know what you wanted to focus on. So I went ahead and red X this one as a bad photo. Let's look at another one. What do you think? I'm going to go ahead and say this one's not a good photo either. My decision here was because I have too much of the foreground. The foreground is what's right in front of you. In fact, the foreground in this image is taking up almost half the entire photograph, and it's not that important. Also, for some funny reason, I feel like these are my subject matter. I didn't go outside to take pictures of plants. I wanted to try to get a good shot of Miss Buchelt, but again, she's kind of not important. She's up here at the top, and I can tell that I'm not really focused on her too much. So this is a bad picture. This picture is pretty close to being a great picture, but can you guess why I went ahead and red X this one? This one has to do with the rule of thirds that Miss Buchelt introduced us to. In this case, I broke that rule by putting the subject matter, the tree and Miss Buchelt, exactly in the center of my image. A good photographer, a good painter, a good drawer often will take their subject matter and not place it exactly in the center, but they'll move it off to the right third or the left third. In this case, I have it exactly in the center. So technically, this isn't the greatest photograph. It's close, but it makes it look like it's more about the tree and not Miss Buchelt. This is my last picture. I feel like I did a pretty good job here. In this case, Miss Buchelt is not directly in the center. She's moved off to the third along with the tree. I have a good balance of background, middle ground, and foreground. There's not too much sky or too much grass. And it does tell a story a little bit. You have Miss Buchelt sketching, and she's looking off this way. So I left a little bit more space on this side of the photograph to kind of help tell that story. This one gets the green check mark as a good photo. Now, this photo is laid out horizontally, which means it's moving from right to left, like a landscape. In this next photo, I turned my camera and got a vertical photograph, or what they call a portrait setup. Here, this photograph was one of a couple I took in the vertical format, but I decided this was not a very good picture. Some of you have already decided it wasn't either. And this is because I had my camera tilted a little bit crooked, and you can see the horizon line is kind of tilted, and it makes for kind of a confusing picture. Was I stumbling? Was Miss Buchelt making me laugh? Maybe I wasn't paying too much attention to my camera before I snapped it. This gets a bad vote. Also, I guess the rule of thirds, I put Miss Buchelt right in the center. This picture, it's pretty obvious. Again, my subject matter was exactly in the center. I should have moved Miss Buchelt over to the right or left, but instead she's in the middle. Another problem here is that she was not ready to have the photo taken. That's why often people say cheese or hold still, or they count 1, 2, 3, and that's in order to allow your subject matter to prepare themselves to have a still position while you get the photo. So this one gets a red X. What do you guys think about this one? It seems to have a good balance of background, middle ground, foreground. Miss Buchelt's not on the right or in the center, but she's moved slightly over to the side, to the right or to the left third. I guess you could argue my horizon line's right in the middle, but I went ahead and said this was a good photo. I liked it because it tells a story about Miss Buchelt. It captures that spring tree in the top part of the photo, but it's not necessarily just about the tree. And I feel like this was a pretty good setup or good composition. So in sharing with you guys these different photos, it's just pretty cool to see how we saw Miss Buchelt sketch a little bit. We planned how the photo would be taken and the composition would be set up. We waited for good light to come back. You notice my pictures are really bright there at the end. And I was able to organize with my subject matter, Miss Buchelt, to hold still in those different poses. And then I made sure that when I held my camera up, it wasn't on accident. I was really thinking before I took and shot the picture to make sure my subject matter was in one of the thirds, that I had an even amount of background, middle ground, and foreground. And it turned out to be some pretty nice photos there at the end. So, and I'm really happy with those photos. So the challenge now is to tell you, hey, grab a camera, an iPad, a phone, and head outside and try to shoot some landscape photos. Maybe you want to get a friend or a parent or brother, sister, maybe even a pet involved as your purposeful subject matter, and see if you can get some good pictures. You're going to have some bad ones. That's how it goes. You're able to delete those really easily because they're digital. And then take those nice photos and place them onto your tablet or your computer. In step 2 of this project, Miss Buchelt on Thursday is going to explain how to edit these photos, and not just edit them just to make the photo look a little bit better, to put an artistic spin on these photos, which I don't want to spoil, but it's pretty awesome what she's going to do. So thanks for joining us today. Good luck with your digital photography adventure, and take some pictures. This will help you set up for Miss Buchelt's lesson coming up next. Take care.